Welcome back to the studio, and welcome to this video where I'm going to be painting over the top of a grisaille. Now you might remember what you're seeing here. This was a video I put out several months ago on painting a grisaille of Monument Valley on a copper panel. Now grisaille is just a fancy word for tonal underpainting, and this here, whilst it looks like a black and white image, it was made up with two different colors, cobalt blue and permanent crimson and lead white. And now that my grisaille is totally dry, which took several months by the way, I'm going to lay in some color. And I'll talk you through the process of how I'm approaching color here, because I'm going to be using a lot of glazing techniques. But while I do this, it actually reminded me of something, and this is pretty important. I really want to talk to you about 5 steps to dramatically improving your art. You see, I'm not just interested in sharing technique with you, but I want to go to work on the entire artist, the whole thing. So I want to share with you some strategies here that have really helped me in my career. So let me just explain what you're seeing here now. I started off with whatever was furthest away. Naturally, that's going to be the sky closest to the horizon. This is a combination of cobalt teal, some lead white, as well as ultramarine blue. And you can see my palette here. I'm going to list all of these colors in that description down below. Once I've put in that blue color, and you'll notice how it changes and transitions from a pretty hazy light blue into a much more saturated note towards the top of the copper panel. Now, when I leave all of those little windows blank that are going to form clouds, and again, I'm following that underpainting pretty closely, I begin to knock in the shadows and then some of those highlight tones of the light bouncing off the top surface of those clouds. Now, clouds we know are light and fluffy, so I don't want to go too heavy-handed with the shadows on the underside of those clouds, and I want to make sure that I feather my edges. So the brushwork here is actually super critical. It does help so much having Eclipse filbert brushes like the one you see in action right here. These provide really soft marks. They carry the paint well, but I want to deposit thin amounts because, again, I don't want to completely obliterate my underpainting. I want some level of transparency, some translucency here to the oil paint film itself, and that way I'm only really lightly staining the underpainting. So I'll carry right across the sky. And as I do this, I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is actually a pretty different approach for me. I have in the past followed a 3-step process of blocking in, modeling, and then detail. And sometimes that detail phase can be split up into 5 different sections where I'm applying layer after layer after layer. But this, whilst it's going to take on a more detailed approach and look, it's actually taking a lot less work. And this is a result of some experimentation, but it's not just trying new things. There's got to be a little bit of direction to it. So let me share with you this 5-step process to dramatically improve your art. Doesn't matter if you're painting a image of Monument Valley like what I'm doing here. You could apply this to a kitten or the Grand Canyon. It doesn't matter. Step 1 is to actually question the process that you're engaged in. Now, I've been at this for 20 years. I'm pretty set in my ways when it comes to the process, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think to maintain that edge, you've got to continue to learn new things. So step 1 is just to have a look at what you're doing and go, is this the best way that I could be doing it? Now, if you ask that question with a level of intensity like you expect an answer, you'll get one. And often when I ask that question, the answer is no, it's not the best way I could be doing this. There's got to be so many other ways of applying paint. I mean, if you just pick up your phone and you go to Instagram and hit that little magnifying glass, you're going to find tons of extremely talented artists who've got a unique way of doing things. Hey, let me ask you something. How would you rate your current level of creative fulfillment? Do you want to push your skills further? How about learning a new strategy or gaining an edge when it comes to selling your artwork, getting commissions, or even getting represented by a gallery? Right now, you can level up your art and unlock your potential. Join our online academy and exclusive community and discover insights that will help you improve dramatically. All right, my friend, let's get back to the video. So again, when I'm looking at other artists working today, and I'm just scrolling through the phone, through the socials, I find myself insanely inspired. And I do question what I'm doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I love what I do. I have a really great time doing it. But I'm not convinced that I'm the best there is or the best that's ever going to be. I always want to be learning new things. Now, I said in my last video, when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. You never really want to arrive. You know, a lot of the best artists that I've talked to on my Creative Endeavor podcast, they are always pushing their abilities to the max, and they're always interested in hearing from other artists about how they do things as well. So it's important to maintain that openness and flexibility with your approach. Now, number 2 is get inspired. You've got to be worked up. You've got to be fired up about what others are doing or other artists from the past. I'm really so insanely inspired by old masters. In fact, I was talking on the podcast this week with Kenneth Yaris about some of his influences. And when he described his painting process to me, I found that there was some similarities here between what you're seeing on the screen right now and the way he's approaching some of his new works. Check this out.
With acrylic paint, I mean, this is another acrylic grisaille I can show you back here.
We're getting the tour here, folks. This is phenomenal.
That one is
beautiful.
Another,
wow.
The next piece. So there is warms in there, like there's yellow ochre mixed in with my acrylic.
Right.
Just acrylic yellow ochre. So this is still just all acrylic underpainting, but now I'm freed up to do color as I want to, and it just feels like it's an extra step, but it seems like it's a step that actually makes that process faster. You know, like I said, well begun is half done. This feels like some of that preemptive attack stuff that if I can get my everything in the right place, it's go time.
To find the full episode, make sure you click the link in the description down below and make sure you're subscribed to the Creative Endeavor. I bring you a brand new interview with a professional working artist every single week where we get to celebrate their triumphs, learn from their trials, and maybe get an edge in how to make it as a professional artist. So if that sounds like you and you want something to listen to while you paint, then check out the podcast. Now, back to the painting. So here I'm working from whatever was furthest away, bringing those tiers of depth forward, and you'll notice the landscape unfold one tier of depth at a time. As I'm coming forward, you'll notice that the colors get more and more intense, and I'm starting to apply more glazing. Now, a glaze is a thin film of paint that just gently tints and influences what it's going over. And sometimes this can be a really intense color, or sometimes it can be a really subtle effect that we're going for. But what really helps here, and is absolutely essential, is the transparency of the oil film. Now, as the name suggests, when we refer to glazing, there's a lot of people that think that that must mean that there's fluidity in the paint. Now, I've seen artists who get copious amounts of medium out and have just a little bit of paint swimming in it, but this will lead to disastrous results down the track. Rather than rely on the fluidity of the medium itself, we must use transparent colors. In fact, Blue Ridge oil paint have got a special glazing set. You'll find that as well as all the other materials listed in the links down below. But check out that glazing set. Amongst some of those colors is transparent yellow oxide and transparent red oxide, which is primarily what I'm using here, with the introduction, of course, of permanent crimson. To get the reds balance just right, I had to use these transparent colors. I tried a little bit of cadmium here and there, but cadmium, as you may know, is really opaque, and so it's not suited for glazing. Now, I had started this painting off with Oleogel made by Rublev, and because I had started with that medium, I have to carry on with that medium right the way through the process. So it's transparent color with just a hint of medium, 1 part medium to 3 parts paint. Now here I'm using a combination of transparent yellow oxide and ultramarine blue to get a nice earthy green. And again, I'm just brushing over the top of that grisaille. This is almost like staining or gently painting with watercolor an old black and white photograph. That's really what it felt like throughout this process. So let's go back to our steps then for how to dramatically improve our artwork, something I'm obsessed with. Now, we've already talked about questioning the process that you're already engaged in, and then getting inspired. Well, the third step is to throw yourself into the experimentation. Start experimenting. Play with something new. Dare to try something different. But it's the next step that is vitally important. You see, a lot of artists, including myself at times, have been stuck in a constant repetitive loop where we don't seem to get out of it, and therefore we don't progress. And this is doing the same thing over and over and over again, but also being kind of mindless in our approach. We need to experiment and try something different, but then step 4 is we need to track our results. Make a note of how it's going. How did that work? And I like to apply the 3 questions. You may have heard this before. What's working? Right, write that down. What's not working? Make a special note of that too. And then what if? And this is where you get to change your approach. And this leads to step 5, which I'll share with you in just a moment. But what you're seeing here is some insane detail applied with a 000 ivory rigger. Now I say insane because it's probably a little bit too much detail, more than I normally like to apply, but once I got started, I decided to go right the way across the painting, and I'm so glad I did. I started painting tiny little rocks on the surface, this angular skirt just laying below the mitten. And when the boulders fall off this vertical geological structure, they scatter across the landscape in a really random way. So all the shadows have got to be slightly different, and the highlights. I start off with this darker color, just lining and cracking and working on the facets of that geological form called a mitten. And then I'll go back and apply a highlight. Now, as I'm going with the shadows and highlights across the painting, just playing with this technique, I've got about 3 or 4 of these rigger brushes on the go. Now, if you want to have a go with this rigger brush, you'll find that as part of my brush set. Again, link in the description down below. These brushes are made by Rosemary Co., and I just love them. I wanted to be selective here with the light that was shining across this landscape and really highlight those areas that I wanted the viewer to focus on. This took ages, but it was so much fun trying to balance out that intensity of light and directing the viewer's attention. So when I get to this place nearing the finish line of a painting, I start thinking about that 5th step, which is hatching a new plan and then taking action. Now, of course, it's important to finish what you start, so I'm not going to rush off and start a new painting before this one's done. I'm going to see this through to the end. But that is the vital 5th step, is we must come up with a new plan, a new approach, and then take massive action. And that's the thing that's missing from not only most artists, but most people, period. Most people don't get off their butt and do something. And that's what I really want to be about this year and encourage you to do the same. Take massive action and enjoy the process. That's what it's all about, isn't it? And so those 5 steps again, question what you're doing. Get inspired by the insanely talented artists working today and from the past. Experiment. Then track your results, evaluate how it's going, and then hatch a new plan, taking massive action. It's been so interesting talking to other professional artists recently and hearing about their individual, unique technical approaches to painting. I always find I come away with something new, thinking about painting in a new way, and ultimately I'm left inspired and changed in some way. But it strikes me how few people are actually open to trying something new. Or they're so heavily guarding their secrets like they've come up with something original that no one's found out or heard of before. I think we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we're taking part in a conversation that's been going on for hundreds of years before we even shown up. You know, I rely so much on the groundwork that the masters from the past have done and have really established before I was even a thought. And this is why I'm so grateful to have access to art and artists. It's access you have too. This ultimately helps us become better artists, and I don't think there's ever been a better time to be an artist. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this video and you've come away with something to think about. Maybe it's inspired you in some way. As always, I appreciate your comments down below. Make sure you leave a like, but also make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We have got so much more to talk about, but I really hope this video is the push that you needed today to get the brushes out and go and paint something. It doesn't matter what you're painting or how you paint it, so long as you got a brush in your hand and you're doing it. All right, my friend, thanks for hanging out. I'll see you in the next video.